Some falsely believe that Jesus did not emphasize a dogma or doctrine, but the need to just love people. Now, oblivious to their blinded philosophy, thus merely stating that no doctrine but Jesus is in fact a doctrine in itself, is it not? Sure, it sounds good and justifies the ashamed worker unable to divide the scriptures. Jesus didn't have to teach doctrine because, for one thing, he didn't have to. The people he addressed pretty much already knew the traditions of Israel in history, in its laws, its prophets, its psalms, etc. Doctrine and eventually dogma arose a century or two later when Christianity had to define itself over and against the religious and other spiritual movements of its day, such as Gnosticism, a kind of New Age movement of its time, which some people might mistaken for Christianity, but which Christians regarded as downright poisonous and that it should be avoided, and what it taught was contrary to the gospel. Thus, doctrine became a kind of necessary unifying force in the church, for if Christians were going to be prepared to die for their faith, they certainly had to know the basic principles of what they believed and what they didn't believe. For if we don't know what we believe and why we believe it, how can we avoid being blown about by every wind of doctrine and ending up in a worse place than when we had begun and started? See, the Bible is very clear that the church should hold certain doctrinal truths, a common faith noted in Titus chapter 1, 2 Peter chapter 1, the faith which was once delivered unto us, Jude chapter 3. So in order to preserve the unity of the faith, the apostles urge believers to hold and to uphold the sound teaching and counteract false teachings and false teachers. And we see that sound doctrine is essential for exposing the false teachers of certain individuals. Now we see this in Scripture, and even John the apostle of love, and Jude, possibly the brother of Jesus Christ, also found it necessary to call attention to those who were departing from the teachings of the apostles. You see, the Christians in Berea were commended for subjecting the teachings of the apostle Paul to scrutiny, and we find this in Acts chapter 17. The word gospel means good news, and the word doctrine means teachings. So the gospel is the whole, and the doctrines are the explanations and understandings of what the gospel is about. In other words, the more we understand about the doctrines, the more meaningful the gospel becomes to us. And therefore, those who truly understand the gospel will not downplay doctrines. To do so is to minimize how much they will know about the gospel. Could it be that those who are arguing for the gospel at the expense of doctrines are simply trying to find a way to justify their opposition to some of our distinct beliefs, or possibly could they be avoiding to disclose their ignorance?